basically anytime that I meet people in real life, most times they tell me, oh, I saw your kitchen chaos course. And that's basically how I learned Unity. So the past few years, I kind of shifted my focus a little bit. So making fewer, shorter, smaller one topic tutorials, making longer, but fewer video courses. So I've done like my kitchen chaos course, which is like 10 hours long. I've done my C# course, which is like 12 hours long.
Do you think you've seen any decline in people wanting tutorials when they can just go to ChatGPT or Grok or their LLM of choice and ask it instead?
AI is actually great to try to chat with it, brainstorm. So I do think it's a generally awesome tool for learning, as long as you don't make the mistake of basically just blindly copy pasting all the code. If you do that, then yeah, you won't really learn anything. That's kind of my issue with vibe coding, which is very popular nowadays. Basically just asking the AI, it gives you a bunch of code, you just copy paste it, and the whole thing sometimes works.
You were actually a successful game developer before the YouTube channel.
I was already making games pretty successfully for like 5 years, I think, before I started my first Steam game came out in 2013, and I launched my YouTube channel in 2018. So yeah, it was for about 5 years then that I was just making games and nothing else.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Dev Dream Podcast. Now, I'm hoping you can help me with a little bit of YouTube experimenting here. I'm trying to figure out if hyping videos actually works, because I asked for it on one other video and that video blew up, but it was also with Jonas Tyroller. So I'm not sure if it was actually the hyping or just by the nature of having Jonas on that it actually did anything. So if you're willing to help me run this experiment, and you're watching on YouTube mobile app, and it's within the first 7 days of this video, those are the things you need to hype a video. If you could go down to your comment section, swipe left, and hit the hype button, I would really be curious to see if it can actually boost this video. It's perfectly free. Everybody can hype as long as you are logged in on the YouTube mobile app, and it's within those first 7 days. So thanks for helping me run this experiment. If it goes well, we will actually end up on the top 100 global leaderboard, which we actually did with that Jonas video, which was very exciting. And so I'm really hopeful to see if we can do it again. Now, if it's not within the first 7 days, or you're watching on anything besides the YouTube mobile app, a good old subscription, hitting that subscribe button goes a long way as well. Thanks, and here's the video. So, Hugo, thanks for joining me. It's very exciting to chat with you. You are a bit of a YouTube legend. You've been, one of the game dev communities, at least on YouTube's, stalwarts, pillars, whatever you want to call it. So something I was kind of curious to begin our conversation with, though, is just the shift in YouTube. So even when I was kind of reviewing your channel, I noticed that some of your older videos would be like, how to add a Unity UI, like very specific. But now, like one of your more recent videos was like, is your UI boring? Do this instead. And so, yeah, what have you noticed just in terms of shifting away from like, type in this exact tutorial to kind of the newer maybe genre of YouTube content?
Honestly, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a new genre, or rather it's more because that is actually a question that I get quite often. Every once in a while I get a comment saying they miss when I used to do some smaller, more focused tutorials. And yeah, I've definitely shifted that a little bit, but it's not exactly that I don't do tutorials anymore, but rather I just shifted from making like smaller standalone tutorials and making much bigger courses essentially. So basically it was like, I think it was like 3 years ago now that I made my kitchen chaos course, which is basically the most successful thing that I've ever done, which is a free 10-hour course on YouTube. And I think it's got like 3.5 million views. So it's insane. Basically, anytime that I meet people in real life, most times they tell me, oh, I saw your kitchen chaos course. And that's basically how I learned Unity. So yeah, that one has done awesome. And basically since then, I kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily 100% shifted, but mostly shifted my focus to, instead of making smaller, like 10, 15 minute standalone tutorials on just one individual thing, to just making more full-length courses on basically a complete game from start to finish, or just covering lots of tutorials in one specific thing. So I'm not sure if that's the best approach when it comes to YouTube or not. I don't know if that's the wisest thing. It's just something that I've been experimenting with. And yeah, I don't know. I really like both things. I really like having individual tutorials on just one topic and just covering that thing and that's it. But I also like covering more things as part of a longer project. So yeah, I like both things. And if it was possible, I would love to do both at the same time. But of course, yeah, that's always the problem. There's not enough time to do everything. So yeah, in the past few years, I kind of shifted my focus a little bit. So making fewer, shorter, smaller one topic tutorials, making longer but fewer video courses. So I've done like my kitchen kiosk course, which is like 10 hours long. I've done my C# course, which is like 12 hours long. I've done my dots course, which has a free video, which is like 7 hours long. And I've made some multiplayer course, which are like 3 hours long. So yeah, basically that's been the main difference. I don't know if that's better or worse in terms of numbers on YouTube. I think they've been sort of similar. I don't know, but yeah, basically just different formats. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of ties into nicely is that I noticed that some of your most successful videos are those long tutorials where people can really go deep and learn something. But then I was also reading this article, and maybe it was talking about the smaller form tutorials, but it was essentially making an argument that AI and particularly large language models are killing the tutorial industry. Do you think you've seen any decline in people wanting tutorials when they can just go to ChatGPT or Grok or their LLM of choice and ask it instead?
That's a great question. Honestly, don't I don't know, just because I've definitely noticed lowering of views, not just on my channel, but in most game dev tutorial channels. However, my question is, I don't know if that is specifically related to AI, because I do think AI is a generally great tool for learning. It's a basically it's the closest thing to a one-on-one personal tutor, without, of course, being a one-on-one personal tutor, because that's something that usually would be very expensive. So yeah, AI is actually great to try to chat with it, brainstorm. So I do think it's a generally awesome tool for learning. And as to whether that's killing the tutorial industry, I'm not sure, because, like I was saying, I did my kitchen kiosk course, which was super successful. I think I did them like 3 years ago. And yeah, at the beginning, it was getting like 5,000 views every single day. And it has been slowly going down over time. I think nowadays at like 1.5 views, 1.5 thousand views per day, which is still a pretty decent amount, but definitely lower than it
Yeah.
was previously. However, the thing is that that decrease sort of coincided with when Unity did the whole runtime fee fiasco, where a lot of
Yeah.
people definitely moved away from Unity. So based
Right.
on that, that kind of happened at the same time, that runtime fee and AI becoming more and more popular. So I have no idea. Is it mostly because the AI thing? Is mostly because the runtime fee thing? I don't know. So I have noticed that slight drop in views, interest in people in general. But yeah, I don't know if it's related to the AI. Probably some of it is, because yeah, like I was saying, I think it's a great learning tool. So part of it definitely is, but maybe not all of it. So yeah, I also don't know the a clear answer to that one. Could be, could not be. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've got a lot of inputs to kind of figure out
Yeah.
in what's going there. You really like AI as a learning tool, and I agree. Do you have any advice or cautions to people? Because I know a common thing that happens, and I'm kind of trying to follow this AI trend, is that people eventually come to a place where they actually, even experienced coders, rely on AI so much that they actually lose some of their ability to code, and they feel like they're actually decreasing their output. So for a new person specifically, what's your advice in how to use AI well and how to not become reliant on it to where you're not actually learning those important foundational things that actually make you a programmer?
First of all, I think it's important to look at AI as basically just a tool. And I started by saying that just because nowadays AI is, I don't know, it's basically kind of like religion, where some people, as soon as they hear AI, they absolutely hate it. Other people absolutely love it. So I think it's important to look at it from a more objective standpoint. It's just a tool. And like any other tool, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't help. So I think it's important to start off from that, just seeing, okay, it's a tool, so I'm not going to immediately dismiss it. And I'm also not going to just believe the hype, because, yeah, there's definitely a ton of hype going around saying, oh, AI is going to completely change the world, it's going to change anything. And the reality is that truth is somewhere in the middle. It is not something that you should absolutely ignore, but also not something that you should believe the hype. So when it comes to building things, I think AI is, like I was saying, extremely good when it comes to helping you learn, as long as you don't make the mistake of basically just blindly copy pasting all the code. If you do that, then yeah, you won't really learn anything. That is basically that's kind of my issue with vibe coding, which is very popular nowadays. Basically just asking the AI, it gives you a bunch of code, you just copy paste it, and the whole thing sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. And when it works, that's awesome. Yeah, you just use normal language and the AI tells you, gives you some code and the whole thing works. But if you just blindly copy paste the code, then you have no idea what the code is actually doing. So if or more accurately, when things actually go wrong, you won't know how to fix it because you don't actually know what the code is doing. So if you just do it like that, it is not actually going to be a very useful tool because it's eventually going to basically blow up in your face. So if you do it like that, I think it is a negative way of using the tool. But if you use to say, okay, generate some code for like a health system, and now, like I was saying, for education is really good. So now tell me, okay, why is this code working? What is each piece of this code doing? Using that to help the AI tell you how it's working, why it works. That way you actually gain the knowledge, you know why it works. So then when it eventually breaks, you know, okay, so it's breaking because this. And if you use it like that, I think it's a generally positive thing. And it's actually going to help boost your own skills. But yeah, if you just use it to blindly copy paste code, you don't know what it's actually doing, then yeah, when it breaks, you won't know why it broke, you won't know how to fix it, and at that way, it's actually going to diminish your skills. So as with pretty much any other tool, if it can be used correctly and can actually help, and can be used incorrectly, which will actually hurt you. So as with any tool, figure out the best way that it fits in your workflow, the best way that it actually helps you. And if you do it that way, if you use it only in the ways that it actually helps you, then it's actually going to end up being a positive. Like for example, in my own use case, I'm already a pretty good programmer, so I don't actually need it too much to generate code. So I don't tend to use it like that. But I do use it a lot for example, for my YouTube work on YouTube, it is extremely important to come up with good titles and thumbnails. That is basically crucial for finding success on YouTube. So usually whenever I make a video, I paste a transcript onto some like ChatGPT and I tell it, give me like 20 different titles based on the contents of this video. And then it basically gives me 20 titles. And out of those, chances are 10 of them are going to be really terrible. Then 5 of them are going to be somewhat decent and 5 of them are probably going to be somewhat good. So then basically combine the entire output of that. And I never, like I was saying, I never blindly just copy paste one title and make it the title of the video, but I take all of those and I combine it with my own brain, try to see, okay, this part from this title sounds like it works, so combined with this part from this title, and basically using that as a sort of brainstorming tool, I find that helps me come up with better titles by working alongside it, as opposed to just copy pasting. That doesn't work, but if I brainstorm with it, I find that it's actually a very useful tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about with AI. Having those nuanced conversations is important. And another thing I've been thinking about lately is as developers and as gamers even, we are more on the like front end of AI than most people would expect. Like most people's parents are not using ChatGPT. And so
Right.
this is still like globally a pretty new technology. And so obviously maybe for the people that have been like really on the forefront, developers and programmers, it feels like we've been talking about it for a long time, but still most people don't know what it is. And AI is like the broad term is kind of tricky. So like people say AI, most of the time they mean LLMs, but sometimes they mean something else. And so, yeah, a lot of people are using it in their workflows. I use it in my YouTube workflows as well. It's a helpful tool. So later down the road, I had a couple viewer questions and one of them was about AI. So I think it makes sense to just drop it in now as we wrap up this little AI section. But one viewer wanted to get your thoughts on if you think that LLMs will ever be able to replace programmers.
Basically, I think the answer to that is if it eventually reaches a point where it's basically super AGI, where it's literally as smart as a human being can actually do literally anything a human being can get, then yeah, at that point, I would say it can replace a software engineer. But at the same time, I would say at that point, we're basically going to be living in a completely different world. It will either be a utopia or dystopia. I don't know. So at that point, the world is basically going to completely change. So I don't find it very productive to worry about that point. And basically anything less than that, no, I don't think it's actually going to replace programs. I think AI is, and especially right now, it's already extremely good at basically creating code snippets. So if you ask it, okay, make me a health system, it is actually going to give you a pretty good health system. But if you tell it, okay, make me a health system that I can integrate into my entire GTA-like game, at that point, it won't actually know how to integrate things correctly. It will try, but chances are it's going to fail massively. So it is very good at generating small pieces of text, but integrating them onto an actual serious project, that part, it still fails quite a bit. So I think that part, the more high-level thinking of a programmer, how to do systems design, trying to think of all of these different systems and how they all connect together in order to make an actual cohesive experience. I think that is, like I said, it basically needs to reach super AGI in order to get that sense, that intelligence of being able to connect all of those together. So when it comes to basically replacing programmers in general, no, I don't think that's going to happen basically anytime soon. So that's really not a fear that I have. Except of course, if you're only basically just a very bare bones junior who is literally just make me a health system, then yeah, technically that part can be replaced. So my advice to that is simply basically just build up your skills. Try to focus on not just being someone who just blindly builds a tiny bit of code. Try to grow your own skills more as an actual software engineer, not just a coder. So someone who actually can think of different systems and how they all connect together. Because yeah, that skill set I think is going to be valuable still for a very, very long time to come.
Yeah, I'm also in the skeptic camp that it could fully replace programmers, and even just like the funny things, like I don't know if you've seen the people on YouTube that will be like, ChatGPT, count to 200, and it just can't do it. And so there are,
Yeah.
basic limitations, and you come up with all these interesting problems about the minute you combine two systems it seems to fail. It has huge security risk, like saving
Yeah.
important info in like a Google sheet, like it gets crazy. So now maybe that's just because we have the most basic front end user piece, and the technology coming is better. That's definitely possible, but from what I've seen so far, I'm with you. I'm also
Yeah.
a skeptic. So transitioning just a little bit, I think I want to continue. We started talking about the YouTube channel, and then kind of went down this AI rabbit hole. But a lot of my viewers are people that want to make games, and I think a lot of them also consider, should I add YouTube? Should I add social media? So you are. I actually just realized when I was watching through some of your content, you were actually a successful game developer before the YouTube channel, and then
Yeah.
after about 7 years of success, added the YouTube channel. So I'm just curious, how do you think about YouTube for you in terms of kind of your whole lifestyle, your whole business? What are you trying to do with it? What does it add for you? Just kind of a broad overview of what it is for you.
Okay, so on that one, I would basically say there are two separate things. Basically, what it is for me is not necessarily what I would recommend for someone trying to find success. Because nowadays, that's actually one of the things that I learned myself as I started doing YouTube. Because in the beginning, I was thinking to myself, okay, if I can make a YouTube channel that gets like, I don't know, 10,000 subscribers and each video gets like 5,000 views, maybe if I can make a game, maybe those 5,000 views will generate like 1,000 sales. And basically, I can guarantee that every game that I make is sort of successful. That was one of my theories just starting, and I basically very quickly realized, nope, that does not work at all. Nope, that is not the thing. What I've learned is how there's basically two completely separate audiences. You've got game developers and you've got game players. And for the most part, game developers, like I've also learned myself, are way too busy making games. They don't actually have too much time to play games. So an audience of game developers is not necessarily going to be an audience that is going to convert into game players and actually buy your game. So that is why making devlogs, especially more tutorial-like devlogs, something that is very much focused towards game developers, usually that is not a very good marketing strategy in terms of actually getting sales on your game. So in that sense, for doing marketing, I would not necessarily recommend doing devlogs. You can kind of do them if you are more of the entertainment route, something as opposed to something more educational. So if you go something more entertainment, something like Danny, which obviously insanely successful. So if you can try to replicate that format, if you look at Danny's videos, they are very much not tutorials, very much not technical at all. It's very much comedy with a game dev background. So if you focus on that, if you focus more on the entertainment side, you will definitely attract more game players as opposed to game developers. And that sense, that strategy can definitely work. But if you go sort of more like the content that I make, sort of more educational tutorial stuff, then yeah, I've definitely learned that one does not convert very well. So if you do have the personality, kind of like Danny, of making more of an entertainment channel, that can sort of work as more of a marketing thing, but definitely do remember that very stark difference that I've definitely learned myself the hard way. Game developers is not the kind of audience that is going to play your game, actually buy your game. So as long as you keep that audience in mind, as long as you make a channel focus more on game players, that can definitely work. But at the same time, if you go for that, I would not necessarily recommend devlogs just because they are usually an insane amount of work. They are very, very difficult. Making a YouTube channel in general is not going to be something that you can make very quickly, very easily. So nowadays, the more recommend marketing, if you want to go that sort of route, it's probably doing more like shorts, something very, very simple, just showcasing some kind of mechanics, something fun that happens in your game. And you go for shorts, Instagram, TikTok, all those things. Those are usually the platforms that are finding more success nowadays. So if that's your goal for marketing, then yeah, that is kind of what you can do, as opposed to what I did myself, which was not necessarily the reason why I started my YouTube channel was not necessarily for marketing. That was one of the reasons. There were several reasons why I started my channel. Like you said, I was already making games pretty successfully for like 5 years, I think, before I started my first Steam game came out in 2013, and I launched my YouTube channel in 2018. So yeah, it was for about 5 years then that I was just making games and nothing else. And yeah, part of the reason why I started YouTube was one of the reasons was, yeah, marketing, as I was trying to experiment with that, which eventually that experiment failed. But then there were several other reasons, like I just wanted to try out different things, like for example, making a game is really awesome and I really enjoy making games. But more than making games, I have a billion ideas, a billion things that I always would love to do. And when I was just making games, I was basically spending an entire year working on just one game, just one idea, and that was it. So that was always kind of, I guess, sort of painful to me. I've got like 100 different ideas in my head, but I know, okay, I need to actually publish a game in order to make money so I can continue paying rent and continue with my life. So I have to basically ignore that part of my brain that is thinking, okay, there are 99 ideas that I would love to make. No, I got to focus on just this one idea. I got to take this to the finish line, and only then can I actually go through that giant to-do list. So part of the reason why I started my channel was also for that, because I thought to myself, okay, so I can continue working on my games, have my 1 year long-term project, but then I can make smaller 1 week videos, and I can do like a video on making like a pathfinding algorithm, then a video on making like a city builder minigame, then making a video on like how do you do an inventory system. So that was another reason why I started my YouTube channel, just as a way to explore my own creativity, to be able to make more systems, more mini games more often, as opposed to just being stuck on just one project for the long term. So there were several reasons why I started my YouTube channel, not necessarily just for marketing, also just for trying out new ideas. And over time, I just realized, okay, I actually really enjoy this. I really enjoy coming up with ideas for videos, standalone videos. I actually enjoy the teaching side quite a lot more. That was something that I definitely did not expect, because for me, it was not, I've always been a very shy, introverted person, which might seem strange considering how I have a YouTube channel. But yeah, I've always been extremely shy, extremely introverted. So I never imagined that I would actually enjoy making a video teaching things. But over time, I realized, oh, I actually do enjoy this. I enjoy both sides. I enjoy making things just for myself, just making a game, working by myself, and that's it. But also enjoy thinking, okay, so how would you make a pathfinding system? How can I teach someone how to do that? I actually enjoy that progress of trying to take the knowledge that I have in my brain, trying to figure out how can I present this so I can actually teach it to someone, so someone can actually gain the knowledge that I have inside my head. Over time, that was something that I enjoyed. And yeah, basically over the years, I kind of shifted more towards that side. So since there isn't enough time to do everything, make both games and education at the same time, over time I kind of shifted more towards making fewer games and making more educational stuff, just because I found that's an area that I quite enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really fun insight. It's like a big part of it for you, it sounds like, is that you have your main core projects, which require a lot of attention and
Yeah.
focus, but then your YouTube channel can really be that outlet. Like, I think a lot of developers feel this sense of like always having ideas, always wanting to try something new,
Yeah.
but needing to stick with the one thing. And so the YouTube channel for you, it sounds like, has become that outlet. And then you've also turned it into something pretty successful. Do you view it almost as like a second piece of your business, because you run these like tutorial courses, I know, and how do you think about it business wise? Is it a separate thing, or is it kind of a side piece of game dev, or is it all just kind of flow together as one big thing?
It's definitely a side thing, just because, especially because I got a different name. So on my games, I use the branding Endless Loop Studios. That's kind of the name that I came up with. And then when I started YouTube, I intentionally use a different name, Code Monkey. So basically, I keep those things separated. And yeah, in terms of just business in general, yeah, they're definitely two very separate things. They kind of connect together, of course, especially in the beginning. Especially my whole unique selling point in the beginning was, okay, I'm actually a developer who's actually making games. I've got games published on Steam, and over here on this channel, I'm going to basically teach you the things that I've learned whilst making my own games. That was kind of my unique selling point at the time, because there were a lot of people making tutorials who were just making tutorials, not necessarily making games. So I figured, okay, maybe I have some more actual real practical advice to give out based on my actual games that I have on Steam. So that's how I sort of envision those. So a little bit connected in the beginning, but yeah, over time, like I said, I focused more on the education side. So those things have become quite a bit more separated. And yeah, in terms of time, like I said, I wish I had time to do both games and education at the same time, but no. So I definitely see those things as more separate. So sometimes I focus more on making a game, sometimes I focus more on the education side. And yeah, those are definitely quite a bit separate. And especially in terms of business over the years. Obviously, since I've been focusing more on education, basically the income from the education side has been going up, whilst the game side, obviously, by publishing fewer games in these past 5, 8 years, obviously that one has been going down. So yeah, it's a question of focus. But yeah, definitely, I do see those as two separate sides.
Yeah, something I think is a challenge of being a developer of really any success number is that your income comes with huge spikes and then like
Yeah.
very slow trickles. Does the education side kind of is it more steady and can it kind of carry you through those times whenever maybe it's been a year since you've released a game?
It definitely is quite a bit more steady. Yeah, definitely is. Because yeah, on games, yeah, as soon as you release, you got a massive spike. Then things go down. Then do like a weekly sale, it goes up, then it goes down, and so on. So yeah, the game side is definitely very spiky. Whereas on the education side, it is also a little bit spiky, of course. As soon as I launch like a brand new course, obviously it's going to sell quite a bit, but then it doesn't drop off as drastically as a game. Like on a game, you can literally sell like X amount on month one and literally go down by like 80 or 90% to month two. Whereas on more education side, it seems to say more stable. Like for example, YouTube views, which YouTube doesn't make too much money, but still it's nice because it's actually pretty constant. So
Mhm.
yeah, on YouTube, I never have like months where I basically have double the income or half the income. No, it's always pretty much the same thing. Up 1 month, 10%, down 10%. So yeah, that definitely gives quite a bit more stability. Like I know, for example, that you did an interview with Bite Me Games recently, and yeah, they also talked about that how their YouTube has been relatively stable and their Patreon has been relatively stable. That basically provides a nice base because yeah, when they publish a game, make a lot of money, then everything drops down. So it's nice to have that nice stable base. In that sense, yeah, education is definitely it's hard to grow, but once it grows, it doesn't necessarily drop like 90% like games do. So it provides a nice, more stable base.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think, any developer could benefit from finding some other thing. Maybe it's
Yeah, yeah.
Patreon, maybe it's tutorials. So, for someone watching that thinks they might want to try to follow in your footsteps, what do you think makes a good tutorial/game dev teacher that might be able to succeed by doing kind of what you're doing?
That's a great question. I'm a firm believer of the fact that everybody teaches in different ways and everybody learns in different ways. So based on that, I don't know that there's just one single format. So I think it's more like you have to figure out the format that best fits you as a teacher and also best fits the viewer as a student. So I don't think there's one universal thing. Like personally, I'm a big fan of well, obviously the kind of videos that I make, more step-by-step things where I'm like, okay, let's write this piece of code, this is what this does, let's write this line of code, this is what this does. But there are other people who do tutorials who are more like sort of like overviews. Okay, so this is in general how this piece of code that it's already written, how this thing works, and this one integrates with this thing. So those are different styles, and I don't necessarily think any of them is necessarily superior or inferior. So my advice to someone would be basically just try out every possible teaching style, every possible learning style, try to figure out what works for you specifically and what works for the audience that is coming to your channel, and try to find the intersection between those, the way that you like to teach and the way that people like to learn, and hopefully with that you find quite a bit of success. But as with basically anything, it all comes down to experimentation. Try out literally everything, and then basically just figure out what sticks, and then just do more of that.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about the changing landscape of YouTube. Do you think someone could start today and have as much success as you've done, or is it too flooded, too crowded, as some people might say?
That's another very tricky question because I specifically remember when I started back in 2018, and back then I was already seeing tons of videos saying, oh, YouTube is dead, you can't do YouTube anymore, it's oversaturated, it's already crowded. So I feel
That's
that is
funny.
something that is always the case, that has always happened, no matter when you start, it is always going to be super crowded, super saturated. So yeah, I guess it comes down to the same thing, experimentation, trying to find out what is your one unique twist that can help you find an audience. And if you can find that, then yeah, I do think you can find success. But at the same time, it's obviously difficult to find that because it's always saturated, it's always overcrowded. So it's always difficult to find that one unique thing. But if you experiment a lot, I think you can find it. So it is definitely very difficult. It's definitely not an area that is easy. So yeah, definitely making a YouTube channel in general or making tutorials, that is definitely not a get rich quick scheme. Nope, it does not work. It is very, very difficult. Even for myself, even like the people asking that question, they might assume, okay, things were easier back in 2018. But back when I started, I remember that it took me 20 months until I received my very first payment from YouTube. So that was 20 months of making videos. I think
Right.
I was making like 3 or 4 videos every single week. So that's like I don't know, that's like uh, um, 200 videos, 300 videos, something like that, before I saw my very first paycheck, before the channel actually started to grow something. So tutorials, YouTube, they were difficult 8 years ago. They are difficult nowadays. So yeah, you always got to find some unique way that works with you, that works with both you teaching and that actually has an audience that wants it. So technically it is possible. It is difficult. It has always been difficult. It will always continue being difficult. But yeah, if there's something that you like to do, I would say experiment, try it out, try to see what works. And yeah, hopefully you do find something that does work.
Yeah, it's funny. That actually sparked a memory. I was just found a Jonathan Blow clip, and he was
Mm.
talking about how people today say game dev is like that. It's too many people doing it. It's too easy. And he was like, people told me that 20 years ago. And it's like, imagine the tools and stuff we've improved over 20
Yeah,
years. People were saying it's too easy, and there's too many people doing it 20 years ago. So
exactly.
at the end of the day, it might be true that something's too flooded, but you're going to be better if you try it than if you don't. And
Yeah,
so I
that
hope
will
people
always
don't
be
let
true.
that.
So yeah, don't let that
Yes.
basically stop you from trying, because that will always be true.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. There will also always be people bringing the negativity, saying you can't do it, telling you all the reasons you can't, and they might even be right, but you're going to be better off if you try it, and they're probably not even right. Anyway, another question I had about your YouTube channel was, what do you do when certain topics that you're interested in don't really do very well? So, for example, I saw you posted a video about VR, which is, not a lot of people into it. And then I
Yeah.
saw you had a follow-up post just kind of saying, I'm going to leave some more thoughts here because it doesn't really seem like people are interested. So, how do you kind of choose topics, and do you ever shy away from stuff because it seems like the interest is not there yet?
Yeah, basically that kind of goes back to the thing that I was saying about experimentation. Yeah, some experiments won't work, some experiments won't quite work. And yeah, then it's up to you as a person making the video. Do you want to make this thing that you know is probably not going to do very well just because you really want to do it? Or do you want to focus on just things that won't do well? And I think it's nice to come up with a mixture. I mean, there are things that I really want to do that I know won't really find too much success, and other things that I might not necessarily be my favorite thing, but I do know they won't find success. So yeah, it's kind of trying to find a mix between those two, because yeah, it is guaranteed that everything will not work, or it is impossible to guarantee that everything won't work. So based on that, yeah, you try some things do work, and maybe that's something that you have a passion for that specific industry. So even if you know, okay, this video will probably not do very well, but I really want to do it, I really like doing it, so I'm still going to do it. Like I said in that post, I talked about how the video, yeah, was definitely not doing very well because VR is definitely still quite a bit niche, but that is not going to stop me from exploring it quite a bit. I mean, I probably won't do like 100 videos related to VR just because I got to mix and match videos that I know won't do well with videos that I won't necessarily do well, but that definitely won't stop me 100%. So VR might still be niche, and I will definitely be making a handful of VR tutorials. Those will probably get fewer views than usual, but it's an area that I'm personally interested, that I want to do. So yeah, I will do those even if those videos don't do as well. And then I will do some other videos that might not necessarily be the most interesting thing just because I know they won't do well. So yeah, basically just trying to find a mix of it. But sometimes it does suck that there are some videos or some formats that I really want to do, but at the same time I know, okay, this will not do a lot of views. So I'd love to make like 10 videos in this format, but yeah, they're a ton of work. I'm not necessarily going to get much of a return on that work. So I gotta, instead of making 10, okay, I'm just going to make one or two, then make some more other videos. So yeah, it's always trying to find that balance.
Yeah, I was super curious to see kind of behind the scenes with YouTube, even just trying to relate some of that to my own and trying to figure out ways I can experiment in things. So I appreciate you sharing that. Something else I'm curious about is kind of shifting to a little bit more of you, the developer, and making games. So do you make all of your games solo, or do you sometimes hire people out for some things that you're less proficient in, or kind of what's your workflow in terms of being a developer?
It's mostly solo, but yeah, I've definitely contracted mainly artists. So yeah, because I'm very much a programmer. I very much do not have any art skills. I can barely draw a stick man. So yeah, for me, art is definitely not my thing. So for that, I've definitely hired some help for people to do that. So in many of my games, I've hired artists, not as an hire in terms of a team, just a hire as in like a freelance. So okay, I need 20 assets. Hey, can you do this fixed price? Okay, you do. I have it. That's it. So yeah, I've never actually worked like as part of a team, like direct collaboration. It's always been just freelance. Just I get set number of assets that I need. So I'm going to find someone, they build that, and I integrate those into the game. So I've used those for mainly for art, sometimes for sound and music. But yeah, other than that, for the most part, my games are mostly solo developed. So basically, whenever people ask me questions of, oh, how exactly do I manage a team of people? I only say, nope, don't ask me that. I don't have any expertise in that whatsoever. Managing people is a completely different skill, and it is a skill that I definitely do not have. So yeah, I'm very much good at guiding myself, managing myself. I know what I need to do and I know how to do it. But yeah, I've always worked pretty much mostly solo. I would say like 90% solo, just because I know how to work. So I do my own things. Then when I need some help, either I hire an artist or simply just using assets from the asset store. So for my last game, Dinky Guardians, pretty much, yeah, I think pretty much 100% or like 95% of the assets in that game were basically taken from the asset store. And then for like the capsule and for those hero images, for those I hired an artist. So yeah, it's basically, I'm a big fan of focusing on your strengths. And I know my strengths are more as a gameplay programmer or just program in general. So I try to focus my games on that and then try to hire out or buy just the visuals, which is definitely my weak point.
Do you think you would ever work on a small team or work with a partner?
I think that is definitely something that I would love to do, just as an experiment, just to try it out. Would it work well? Would it not work well? I have no idea, but yeah, that is definitely something that I would love to do potentially at some point in the future. Yeah, because I also really enjoy just working by myself. I mean, just I have my giant to-do list of tasks, so I really just go through them one by one. So I really enjoy the fact that I don't have to basically check in with anyone. So I find that I'm very productive because I can just do things. They're on my to-do list, so I'm just going to do them myself. But at some point in the future, yeah, I would love to try that out, try to see, who knows, maybe it's actually better. Maybe I would try it and I would actually love it. So yeah, that's an experiment that at some point in the future, probably not in the near future, but sometime in the long future, definitely something that I would love to experiment.
Yeah, I think it's Jonas Tyroller said his tier rankings of favorite work modes that he's done is working on a small team with people he really enjoyed was at the top.
Mm.
And then it was like working by himself. And then it was like working with people that he didn't like would be
Uh,
worse than working by
of
himself, which I
course,
don't know
yeah.
that none of the people he worked with that happened. He's just like, I
Thankfully,
imagined
yeah,
that would be work. So if you
yeah,
can find those people that you can vibe with and work well with,
yeah.
that's what he said was his favorite. But anyway, I was just curious. Another thing that Jonas has been talking about lately that I've been kind of thinking through and asking people about is how they handle prototyping. And I've
Mm.
seen a surprisingly broad range of like Pontypants, for example, didn't do any prototyping. He basically just
Yeah,
had an idea and did it. And then Jonas is like, we did all these, did a whole
yeah.
video with showed 12 prototypes. So do you do prototyping whenever you're starting a new cycle of a game? What do you do with it?
That's a good question because I've it's a good question because my answer depends on what I've done and what I recommend. So I would definitely, if someone's asking me for a recommendation, I would definitely recommend the Jonas Herald method. Make a ton of prototypes, covering a ton of genres, a ton of different game ideas, post about them everywhere and try to see which one sticks and then basically work on that. I think that is the best, most scientific way of trying to work on something that has the potential to find success. So that would definitely be my recommendation. But in terms of me personally, I've always had to sort of force myself to make prototypes just because I tend to get really attached to an idea. I've got like a billion different
Mm.
ideas, but I always think to myself, okay, this one would be really cool. And I'm not a big fan of like game design documents, so like things where you spend like days or weeks just building a giant 50-page document detailing the whole idea. I really like thinking, oh, this idea would be cool. So let me just start writing code right now and start building the idea right away. So I always tend to, whenever I'm starting a new project, I always tend to just think of the 100 ideas that I have. Oh, this one seems cool. Let's just start working on it right away. But so I don't necessarily tend to make that many prototypes. I always have to force myself. Okay, I'm at least going to prototype on paper. So I don't necessarily make too many actual prototypes, but before I start working on something, I always try to write down a bunch of ideas on paper, try to think, okay, so this idea, just simple page, just trying to design, okay, so this is how the game idea is going to work, and try to write like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 pages of that, and then I start working on something physical right away. So in my own personal experience, I definitely think that I should prototype quite a bit more, start off by prototyping a bit more on paper and then actually making a bunch of prototypes. And yeah, but that is definitely something that I constantly have to struggle, have to find myself. So that is why I try to give that advice to people. I try to say very explicitly, okay, I definitely recommend the Jonas Herald approach. Definitely even if you think, okay, your first idea is going to be awesome, you're just going to focus on that, I definitely recommend, okay, take some time, actually try to explore more ideas, because that is definitely going to improve your odds of finding success.
Yeah, so whenever you have one of those ideas that maybe rises to the top that you think you'll work on, how much of what you're deciding is on how successful you think the game versus just how much you like it? So for example, I know that you've interviewed Chris Zukowski, and he's very big on like, here's the couple of genres that are most likely to be successful. Here's kind of what Steam likes. Are you considering any of that whenever you're picking one of those games, or are you just following kind of what you want to work on?
That's a very important question. It's actually a question that I get myself, or not necessarily a question, but more like slight criticism, a slight pushback whenever I talk about basically game dev success. Because yeah, I definitely do give out the same advice that Chris Zukowski says, which is here are the genres that are doing well on Steam. So if you want to find success, I recommend you go for those. But whenever I make a video or a post talking about that, there's always some criticism that goes, oh, I don't like the strategy of trying to make games just to force yourself to go through a genre just to find success. I want to make a 2D platform, so I'm just going to make that. So whenever I talk about that kind of topic, how to find success on Steam, I always have to put in the caveat, which is this only matters if your goal is to actually make a living from games. If you're trying to make this as a business, if so, then I really recommend that you look at what are the genres that do well and try to focus on those. But if you're just making games for fun, if it's just a hobby that you just want to enjoy, by all means, do whatever you want. If you want to make a 2D puzzle platformer, by all means, if that's for fun, then go ahead and do it. It will probably sell 0 copies, but if you're making it for fun, then number of copies doesn't really matter. It shouldn't matter. So if you're making it for fun, do whatever you want. But if you're trying to make this as a business, if you're trying to be a professional, if so, then yeah, I do recommend you try to follow what is finding success on Steam and try to find something in that. But of course, there's the other caveat, which is when I say that, so people then tell me, okay, so are you recommending that I make something that I absolutely hate just because it won't find success? And to that, I say, no, absolutely not. If you try to make a game that you absolutely hate, you won't probably not reach the finish line. You'll probably give up your project and just quit. So the ideal goal is to try to find something that sits in the intersection of things that you do want to make and things that actually find success, and try to find what sits within that middle. Like, for example, if you told me that right now the things that are finding success, the only genre that is successful, or the best genre to find success, are like visual novels, I would definitely not force myself to make a visual novel, because that is not a genre that I enjoy. So I would not enjoy playing it. I would not enjoy making it. And if I don't enjoy it, chances are I would not make something that is good, even if the genre had a chance to find success. So that is why you need to find something that sits in that intersection, which for me, thankfully, it is actually very easy, just because I generally enjoy games that are like simulator games, incremental games, strategy games, crafting games. Those are what's popular on Steam. So for me, it is very easy for me to find something that sits in that intersection. But for other people, yeah, basically try to find that, try to see what is popular, because there's actually quite a few genres that are popular that have good odds of finding success. So just try to find within those something that you would actually enjoy doing, as opposed to just, if you just literally just enjoy 2D puzzle platforms, then things are quite a bit difficult. But I would say most people actually enjoy more genres than just that. So yeah, try to find out what are things that you both want to do and has potential to find success. And if you do that, then you will probably make something won't that you won't be able to take to the finish line, because it's something that you enjoy doing. And if you chose a good genre, chances are you will have better odds of finding success. So that project will probably go well.
Yeah, finding that intersection is really important. And most of the people that at least that I interview and I think in my audience, their main dream is that they want to make enough money to just make more stuff. And if you want to do that, you do have to play the game a little bit, so
Yeah,
to speak. And so, but I really like your advice of that doesn't mean you have to just abandon what you personally like and what you bring to the world. You just have to
yeah, of
find
course.
the overlap of those things. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah.
And like you said, it seems that that works really well for you. Your most recent game was a simulation game, Dinky Guardians. I would love to spend some time asking you a couple questions about that. And before we go like too specific for that, just how do you have any insight into how you find like worlds or settings for games? So like Dinky Guardians has these cool little guys and it's in outer space and it's kind of this unique thing. How do you actually draw inspiration to decide what the game's going to look like and where it's going to be and stuff like that?
I think in terms of theme, it really just comes from playing things, trying out different things. So yeah, I don't know specifically what gave me that idea. I don't know. I've always enjoyed factory games, so I knew that I wanted to make a factory automation game. And it just turns out that most of those games are more like sci-fi sort of thing. So I'm a big fan of Factorio, definitely one of my favorite games of all time. Big fan of Dyson Sphere Program. That's also one of my favorite games of all time. And yeah, both those are basically sort of sci-fi. So I guess that's why I sort of subconsciously started with more of a sci-fi sort of thing. But then, of course, I don't want to just make a clone, because if you make just a clone of some other game, then there's really no point. I mean, if you make a literal 100% clone, why wouldn't people just play the original? They probably would. So you always have to give some kind of unique thing to whatever game idea you have. So that's when I started thinking to myself, okay, how can I make some kind of automation game, but something that is slightly different? So yeah, basically just did a bunch of thinking about that idea. That's when I thought, okay, what if instead of having conveyor belts, what if I had some little creatures that were just basically moving the resource around? So yeah, then I started exploring that idea a little bit more. And then when it comes to coming up with visuals, like I said, I'm not an artist myself. I definitely don't know anything about art. So for that, I basically just went to the Unity asset store and basically just browsed everything, just trying to come up with general ideas, just trying to see what inspires me to build something. And yeah, basically whilst browsing those, I saw, oh, here are some nice, cute little creatures. So yeah, I think this would be would be nice for the sort of the conveyor belts in my game. So I could have these little creatures, and I could have like the normal person. Then I'm also always been a big fan of the low poly style. So okay, so I can combine these with these low poly art style. Then I also try to figure out what would be some kind of interesting shader that I could use to make this game kind of stand out, kind of go with that. So I basically bought a ton of custom shaders from the asset store and tried to explore them. So I definitely did a bunch of let's say visual prototyping, trying to mix and match a bunch of different visuals, different assets, trying to see what would make the game sort of stand out instead of making it look generic. And in the end, yeah, I think it actually came up with something that was slightly different from everything that exists, and I was quite happy with that. So yeah, basically just did a bunch of prototyping, brainstorming. Yeah, it was definitely not the first thing that came to mind. No, definitely just thinking through it and coming up with things. Some things work, some things don't work. And over time, I think I came up with something that at least I was quite happy with.
Yeah, you definitely came up with something that stands out. And I mean, when you look at it, it's unique and you can tell that it's not something that was already existing. So you definitely succeeded there. Do you think you were able to implement anything in the gameplay or in the design that kind of stands out in the simulation genre, like the visuals do?
I think the main thing is really just that the lack of conveyor belts. Because I mean, I think nowadays there are definitely quite a lot more games that are automation games without conveyor belts. But especially like, I don't know, I think it's been like 3 years since I made the game, and I think 3 years ago there weren't quite as many. So I think that part was a little bit unique, just because most factory automation games, it was that was basically default. That's what you think as soon as you think of factory automation game. You think, okay, I got a factory, I got conveyor belts, and I got a different factory. That was basically the standard. So I think the part was nice, different, basically controlling some creatures as opposed to conveyor belts. So yeah, I think that was the most unique thing that I came up with for the game. And yeah, a bunch of the reviews, they enjoyed that. They enjoyed the fact that it was factory automation without conveyor belts. Yeah, that was a nice twist.
Yeah, I don't really play the automation genre much. What do you think is like the one thing that you have to get right for the game to be fun for those players? Is there like a core either loop or mechanic, or what is that player base looking for a game to at least hit the baseline of being fun?
I think the main thing is really optimization. You have to, whatever you do with all kinds of machines, crafting, conveyor belts, you can have whatever combination of machines and transportation as you want, but you have to make sure there's some ways to kind of optimize it over and over again. So, like upgrading conveyor belts, making machines that work a little bit faster, machines that take in two inputs and convert them into one. So, it's very much a genre that is very much focused on constant optimization, constantly trying to make your factory a little bit faster, a little bit bigger, a little bit more efficient. So if that's a genre that you want to make, I would definitely focus quite hard on that, quite on the numbers and machines and how all the machines interact with one another. Because yeah, you definitely want the player to constantly be thinking, okay, how can I make my factory a little bit more efficient, a little bit more capable? How can I reach the next level tier of crafting and so on? So yeah, but within that, there are definitely a billion different ways of achieving those. So yeah, it's thankfully it's a genre that is actually very popular on Steam. So there are quite a lot of games in that genre. So I'll definitely say explore that genre, and you'll be able to see how all of those different games Those are all very different. Those have different mechanics, but they always very much focus on that, very much focus on giving the player lots of tools so they can optimize their factory, make it quite a bit more efficient, more productive. That is something that is definitely very crucial that players really enjoy.
Yeah, what ways did you allow players to optimize in Dinky Guardians? What are some of the things that you implemented?
For me, the main thing was how, so in the beginning, you start off with dinkies, so these tiny little creatures, and you basically have them manually go here, gather some food, then drop the food over here. Then this other dinky is going to feed a bunch of other dinkies. So in the beginning, it's all very manual. You're basically using your dinkies to do work for you. But then the progression after that is basically start buying machines, and then those machines basically do the exact same work that the dinkies do, so that the ultimate goal is to eventually make sure that the dinkies can be basically retired. So the final goal in the late stage of the game is that the dinkies don't have to do anything, and the whole thing is basically just handled through machines. So that is very much the optimization process. You start off with the dinky just manually jumping around, then you upgrade into a machine. That machine automatically mines, automatically grabs and drops items from here to here. Then another machine automatically crafts and so on. So yeah, that optimization is very much crucial to how I designed the whole game.
Yeah, that's very cool. What was the biggest challenge that you ran into in designing Dinky Guardians?
Oh, good question. I think in terms of programming, there were actually quite a lot of challenges in terms of performance and making it work right. Because a crucial part about the game is how it's not just set in just one planet, but you can actually colonize other planets. You can build machines on other planets. But those other planets, those are basically, in technical terms, in Unity, those are completely separate scenes. So you are basically on planet A, but the machines that you built on planet B, those are still there. Those are
Interesting.
still actively working. The ecosystem, all of the automation that is constantly going as you're over here. So that was a very interesting technical challenge, which is how exactly do I simulate this world happening over here, even though visually nothing actually happens because this world is actually not loaded at all. So I'm on this world, but there's basically just a a mini simulation running because I couldn't possibly run an actual real 100% simulation. I tried it in the beginning, and it obviously did not work. I can have like
Right.
100 machines over here, 100 machines over here, 100
Yep.
over here, all of them simulating in real time. That basically just killed the frame rate. So I had to come up with a lot of very clever ways of trying to fake that simulation and trying to make that work. So in technical terms, that was a very interesting challenge. Like I said, for me, I'm mainly a programmer, so I really enjoy that. I really enjoy coming up with clever programming solutions for how to solve those specifically performance issues. That is something that I really enjoy doing, which is something that a lot of people really dislike doing. It's that optimization work, trying to optimize your game, trying to make it actually performant. That is something that I've always really enjoyed, trying to go inside the profile and trying to see, okay, this function is taking a little bit too much time. Let's go inside it. Let's try to modify this thing. Try to turn like from a for each loop onto a for loop, trying to get just a little bit more faster milliseconds. That is something that I've always enjoyed. And yeah, that was definitely a very big challenge and also a challenge that I really enjoyed trying to solve. And in the end, I believe I solved it. In the end, the game is actually very performant, even in late game when you've got multiple worlds, all of them colonized, all of them working together. So that was interesting, fun challenge.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Finding that way to
Yeah.
simulate off-screen stuff that can't go sounds like a real challenge. So that's pretty cool. Um, Also, last question about Dinky Guardians is I'm just curious kind of how you think about it in terms of success, whatever that means for you. So I just checked and it's sitting at 95 reviews on Steam and very positive, so really well received. But that's maybe not like a viral hit, so to speak. And I know you've actually even talked about videos of like how do you sustain in game dev without a hit like that. So did you consider Dinky Guardians a success?
Yeah, for me, definitely a success. Definitely not a massive success. Definitely did not make like $500,000. No, but at the same time, it didn't need to do that. I mean, when I first announced the game, I made a video talking about what are my goals with this project, and I basically said how my goals were the same as when I was just making games before I even started YouTube. Which is back then, my goal was to basically make about $2,000 per month. Because over here in Portugal, thankfully, the cost of living is relatively low. So if I make about $2,000 per month, I can have a pretty nice life. So that was basically my goal with that game. And yeah, I thankfully I'm also already very proficient because I've been doing this for like 20 years. Yeah, my first proper game, my first Flash game was in 2008. So it's been almost 20 years since I've been making games. So thankfully, I'm already very efficient, very productive. So I was able to build that game despite being a very complex game. It's a factory automation game with crafting, defense mechanics, colony management mechanics. So it's a very complex game. But despite that, thankfully, because I'm already quite skilled, I was able to build that entire game in about 7 months. And that was in 7 months half of it full time. So I think for about 3 months, I was working 100% just on the game and nothing else. And for the rest of it, I was half working on the game and half basically keeping my channel alive. So doing a bunch of videos. So in all that time, in about 7 months. So, like I said, based on my goals, I would only need to make about 14K in order to consider it a profitable project, and did make quite a bit more than that. I think it made like double that. I don't know, something like that. So, yeah, definitely not a massive hit, but thanks to my relatively low cost of living, thanks to the relatively fast amount of time that I managed to build it in, yeah, definitely a profitable project. So if I was just making games and I wasn't making videos or YouTube or anything else, then yeah, if I have games with that level of success, they're not massively successful, but they are definitely enough successful that I can basically continue doing this for the long run. So that is something that has always been very important to me, the sustainability part. So I've made a lot of games. I've definitely had some games that were quite a lot successful. Like my most successful game was Game Corp DX, which I think has made like some like $250,000 in gross revenue. That is definitely not a massive hit, but for me
Right.
personally, for a sole developer, that's a very good amount. And then I've had some
Yeah.
other games that made like $10,000. So thankfully, over the years, you've got some hits, some flops, but everything stays nice and sustainable. And yeah, Dinky Gardens was basically one, just basically on the middle point. Not a massive hit, but definitely enough to allow me to continue doing this. So in that sense, yeah, definitely considered a successful project.
Yeah, I think a big thing that helps you too is the speed you can develop. I mean,
Yeah.
putting 7 months into that game, whereas maybe a new developer, it might take them 3 years to make the same game.
Yes.
That's going to change how much you feel it was a success. So,
Yeah.
go
And
ahead.
that is also something that because like the one advice that I constantly give out is make small games. I believe that it's an excellent strategy, especially nowadays. I think that becomes even more important. And whenever I give out that advice, people always tell me, "Oh, so are you recommend that we just make Flappy Bird clones and that's it?" And no, that is definitely not the case. So when it comes to small games, first of all, they're not meant to be in like 1 week games. That is not my definition of small. My definition of small is 3 to 6 months. If you're an experienced developer, maybe push it up to 1 year. I would say that is the rough range of what is a small game. But then the most important thing is, yeah, basically skills are an extreme multiplier on that. So when you are a beginner, in about six
Right.
months, yeah, it might take you 6 months to build something like a Flappy Bird clone. You probably can't be productive enough to make something more decent in just those 6 months. But then you've got, for example, me. I've been doing this for like 20 years. And with my skills, in 6 months or 7 months, I can make a very complex game that is strategy, crafting, automation, and so on. So what you can make in a small time frame is very much related to your current skill set. Your skills are very much a multiplier on how productive, how efficient you are. So as you become more and more skilled, the type of game that you can make on the exact same time frame becomes quite a bit more complex, quite a bit more interesting. So that is why my advice is basically gain more skills, gain a lot more experience, and then the things that you can do in a smaller time frame become better and better.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of the make small games conversation that doesn't get brought up enough is that if you continue to make games for 6 months over and over again,
Yeah,
each one will be better and more complex and bigger. Even though you're putting the same input in, you're
exactly.
multiplying it a lot. So that's a really good way to look at it. To wrap up our conversation, I let my viewers know you were coming on. A couple of them were very excited. And so if I could ask you a couple of questions from viewers, they would like that. One person, you've kind of already hit on this based on your strategy, but how do you make a living while putting content on YouTube for free? Was their question.
For that, I'm a big fan of the strategy of like make 90% of what I do for free and then charge for the 10%. I really like that strategy. I've always enjoyed that. Basically, I always think to myself back when I was a kid, back when I was like, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, and I wanted to make games, but I had literally no money. I mean, I think my parents gave me an allowance of like $5 a month. So yeah, I was definitely not going to be buying even like $20 courses. That was just not a thing. I didn't even buy any games, any books, anything just because I had literally no money. So nowadays, as I'm on the education side trying to make things, I always try to think of that kid myself nowadays, and I want to make sure that kid nowadays still has access to high quality education. So, because that for me, it is very important that I continue making a ton of free stuff. And thankfully, I've been able to find something where, yeah, basically 90% of what I do is completely for free. I've got tons of free courses, free tutorials, lots of free stuff on YouTube. And then I've got some paid stuff. And thankfully, there are enough people that do buy that paid stuff to then basically make the whole thing, make it possible, make it sustainable. Like I think, for example, my C# course, which there's a free video with all of the video lectures on YouTube. It's like a 12-hour video. It's super extensive, covering basically everything. So basically, if I was a kid, I would have loved to have that video. So that is awesome. And that one is completely free. That one has like 250,000 views, I think. And then I've got a premium version for people who can afford, who has a bunch more bonuses like interactive exercises, and it's got a bunch of nice things, but not required. So basically, if you just follow the free YouTube video, you will get all of the knowledge. The paid version is basically just selling convenience. Just it's easier for you to actually put into practice the skills that you're learning. So it's basically a nice thing. It's a nice to have, but it's not a requirement. And on the free video, it's got about 250,000 views. And on the paid course, I think I've sold like, I don't know, less than 1,000 copies. But those 1,000 copies are definitely more than enough to justify the amount of time that I spent working on it. So thankfully, there's a very small percentage, but that very small percentage of people is more than enough to make a sustainable living, a sustainable business. So yeah, that's basically my strategy. 90% for free, 10% paid, and thankfully there are enough people buying that 10% that I can continue doing this forever. Yeah.
Well, it's a huge benefit to the community, and I myself have even benefited from a few CodeMonkey
Oh,
tutorials. So
thank
thanks
you.
for putting those out there, and yeah, they're really good and really helpful. Another viewer asked, "Will you ever make another Steam game?"
Yes, I definitely want to. I mean, I've got a game that I actually announced 3 years ago, I think. It is called Total One Liberation, and I really like that idea. I really want to build that idea. I think it's an idea that actually has potential. It's basically a turn-based strategy open world game with crafting. So I think it's the kind of thing that would actually do well on Steam, but it's also a very big project, something that is going to take a lot of months, a lot of time to actually build. And back when I announced it, I worked on it for, I don't know, like 3-4 months, I think, until I got to the conclusion where it was like, okay, I think this is still going to take me like a year to finish, and I don't really have the time to justify spending 1 year just on this project. So I basically put that on hiatus, and I actually switched to working on Dinky Guardians, which was a smaller project, and it was meant to be like a 5 month project. Took about 7 months. Okay, that was roughly it. So basically, I thought to myself, actually last year, okay, on the later part of this year, I want to get back to working on Total War Liberation. But then, of course, I've got a billion things that I want to do, a billion videos, tutorials, courses, topics that I want to research, many things that I want to do. So last year, I wasn't able to do that. I basically just went to doing all kinds of things. Now this year, I'm kind of telling myself the same thing. Okay, on the later part of this year, I want to get back to working on the game. But yeah, will that actually happen? I don't know, because yeah, I just recently went to GDC, and for example, whenever I would go to those events, my to-do list, instead of getting shortened because I'm doing things, no, it actually just gets longer because I meet with so many cool people. I see so many cool companies, so many cool tools that I really just want to research those. So basically the amount of things that I want to do is constantly increasing. So I very much want to make another Steam game. I will definitely make another Steam game, but yeah. Is it going to be later this year? Will I be able to actually get back to that project like I want to? Or will I get sidetracked by so many other awesome things that I want to do? I really wish there was infinite time. I really wish I could pause time and literally just do everything that I want to do, but that's not possible. So I got to work basically in seasons, basically do different things every once in a while. So I very much want to, maybe later this year, maybe not, who knows. So I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you'll just work on it 2 or 3 months a year for the next 5 years,
Yeah,
and then it'll
maybe.
come in 2033 or something. So
Sure. Maybe that's
that's very
it.
cool. Yeah. One other question, and this actually kind of circles back to our AI conversation. This person they watched your video about being successful as an indie dev, and they were wondering if AI tools, if you think it makes it easier for indie devs, or if it actually makes it harder because more people are getting into it.
Well, just even without AI, just thinking about tools in general, that is always the two-sided coin to things, which is as tools get better, it gets easier to do things, so that's awesome. But the easier it is to make games or literally anything, the more saturation there is. So that's always a two-sided coin with literally any tool, whether it be AI or anything. Like for example, nowadays making a game is basically the same thing as it was 20 years ago starting a band, which is like literally anybody can buy a guitar for like 10-20 bucks, and technically you can start a band, which means it is very easy to start a band, but it is very hard to actually make a band that is financially successful. Same thing with making games, which is 20 years ago, tools were very difficult, so it was pretty much impossible for a solo dev to make a complete game. Nowadays, tools are really awesome, so it is very easy to literally anyone make a game, which means there are tons of games coming out, which means that it's actually difficult to find success. But I definitely recommend people try to do that if there is something they want to do. So I do think tools nowadays have never been easier. So if someone wants to make a game, they can make a game. The tools are super easy, super awesome. Basically any tool. I mean, personally, I use Unity, so I really enjoy it. So I always recommend it. But Unreal is also awesome, and it's also free. And Godot is also awesome. It's also free. So literally, there has never been a time where it's been easier to make games. And putting games on Steam, 20 years ago, you had to actually know someone. You had to actually have direct contacts in order to put your game on Steam. Nowadays, anyone with $100 can put something up on Steam, and who knows, maybe it might be the next Schedule One, maybe. So yeah, that the in terms of accessibility, it has never been easier. It has never been more accessible. So yeah. On the other side, of course, it is always that makes it so that it has never been more saturated. So nowadays, if you want to make a game, you have access to the tools, so you can much more easily make games, but then you also have to focus quite a bit more on marketing so they can actually stand out. So yeah, it's always that balance. But at the same time, it goes back to what we were talking about a while ago. You can make games just for fun. So if you want to make games without any goal of financial success, that is perfectly fine. Making games can be a very fun hobby that you do just on the weekends, just on the side. So when it comes to that, there's basically no downside whatsoever. Tools are awesome, so you can make games, enjoy it, have fun with yourself, have fun with your friends, make them, publish them, and that's it. So tools, whether it be with AI or not, yeah, tools are awesome nowadays. So if there's something you want to do, I definitely recommend you do it.
Yeah, then my last question maybe kind of ties in with that is just where's the best place for someone to start to learn programming if they're intimidated by it?
Oh, intimidated. That's an that's an interesting adjective. I say that just because me personally, I've loved programming ever since I first saw it when I was 10 years old. So programming has never been intimidating to me. So I think I would just say, I mean, the amount of learning content there is nowadays is basically infinite. So I would say if you feel intimidated, I don't know. I guess it's maybe a cop out answer. If you are intimidated, try not to be, because there's really nothing to be intimidated about. I mean, if you see some really complex code, then yeah, I can understand that it's very intimidating. But if you try to find a beginner tutorial where they are literally just explaining what is a variable, just doing that from scratch, you can see it turns out it's actually not that intimidating. If you start from the basics, it's really just very simple, just a handful of characters, just make define a variable, then to make a function. So if as long as you focus on the very beginner stuff, then things are actually not that intimidated at all. So if you're the kind of person who has always been intimidated by code, chances are you've only ever seen some very complex code, some very advanced code. And yeah, that one does seem very intimidating for a beginner. But if you try to see something basic, then you'll be able to see, okay, it's actually not inherently intimidating. It's more like you were just looking at more advanced stuff. But if you look at beginner stuff, if there's something that you have interest in, I definitely recommend you try to find some more beginner tutorials, and you'll be able to see it's actually quite a bit more approachable than I thought. I can actually try to do this, and it might actually be something that you might actually enjoy.
Yeah, starting small, really good advice. If you're going to learn how to play piano, you don't start by playing Mozart. You
Of
start by
course,
playing
yeah.
Mary Had a Little Lamb or something. So, very, very similar concept here. Well, Hugo, this has been an incredible conversation. Let me end you with this one final question. So, this is the Dev Dream podcast, and I made it to inspire myself and others to keep following our dreams of making games. And I think that one way to be inspired is to hear about what other people are excited about. So, I'm just curious for you, in this season of life, you've been developing a long time. What would you say is your game dev dream at this current stage of life?
That's a great question, because I've never been a person who has like one individual dream. I've always been a person who has like 100 different ideas, and I really just want to build all of them. So yeah, basically, whenever people ask me, what is your dream game that you would love to build if you had infinite budget, I really never have a good answer to that. I'm more like, okay, I'd rather spend that infinite budget making 100 different unique games, all of them different, all of them in different genres, doing different ideas. I think that is the thing that I basically really enjoy: variety, trying out different things, different ideas. So that is probably my dream right now, and what is always my dream, just going through my giant to-do list of things and trying to do those a little bit by little. So yeah, just build things that I want to do, and hopefully I can do them one by one.
Well, Hugo, that's a fantastic dream. I hope you're able to make it a reality. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks so much for having this. I really enjoyed the podcast. I just found it recently, and I've been watching a bunch of the various episodes, and they are really awesome. So yeah, thanks so much for having me, and keep doing awesome stuff.
Thank you.